back to the Early Weigh-In podcast. This Saturday, we're at the O2 Arena, UFC London, where we got Alexander Volkov taking on England's own Tom Aspinall. It looks like things are finally getting back to normal, man. We're going overseas to London here. Next week, we're in Columbus, Ohio, and hopefully, man, we can get one back in Nashville here pretty soon. Dude, this Saturday, absolutely ridiculous slate of fights to take us back to London. Slew of British talent, Arnold Allen, Paddy the Baddy. Man, our boy Gunnar Nelson's returning. You and I have been so hyped for the debut of Mohammad Mokaev, and honestly, I could just go on and on. But the biggest thing I want to point out in our co-main event and our main event, man, we got pick'em odds, and we're just not used to seeing that recently. We're used to laying chalk heavy on that main event, or trying to find ways to reduce that line on who we think is going to win. So, man, I'm super excited for Saturday. We're in the hat again this week, man, but not necessarily in defeat. I think we both had a fantastic night, and I felt like our reads were spot on.
Yeah, man. I mean, just taking a look at your card, it's a lot of green right there. The only one that didn't pan out was the Marlon Moraes versus Song Yadong. Fight starts round 2.
He's shot.
Marlon is shot. The chin is shot. I still think that that's a good bet whenever you got 2 bantamweights and you can get under 2 to 1 odds for it to hit the second round. I think that that's a good bet. Looking at your other bets, I think that the best bet that you had on the card was probably the Miranda Maverick 5 units at minus 260, man. Yeah. She covered that price tag, every bit of that price tag, even the closing line odds, which got up to almost 4 to 1.
Right.
Then, you look at the Asmarat Murazakhanov. I'm sure you were never worried during that fight
at
all. No, he came through for you at the end, though, and maybe lucked out a little bit, but
killer knockout.
Great night all around, man.
Absolutely.
You ended up plus 3.90 units and 32% return on investment. Looking over at my card, I think that my best bet was probably the Ankalaev over 1.5 rounds, minus 190. Definitely a boring main event, but that one seemed to be a lock.
Cash with ease.
Yeah, for sure. Then the other one I wanted to point out was the J.J. Aldridge versus Jillian Robertson fight goes to decision. I actually released the over 2.5 on the podcast, but man, when the FanDuel odds came out at plus 122 for it to go to decision, that was an automatic hit, auto bet right there.
And never in doubt for that one either.
Not at all. I ended up the night plus 6.14 units with a 61% return on investment, and we're both looking to keep the ball rolling.
Dude, man, with 10 units that we give each other, 6.414 units, you can never hate that, man.
Never. In our main event of the evening, we have Alexander Volkov taking on Tom Aspinall. And what an amazing main event for this already stacked card here. Both of these guys are legitimate title contenders in the future, with the winner likely getting the title shot. Francis sitting on the sidelines, Jones not making his heavyweight debut yet. There's definitely a spot to be filled there, and both these guys could get that with a great win here. I want to start this breakdown by saying that this is a huge step up for Aspinall. He's on his home turf. He's got all the pressure in the world on him. Whereas Volkov, this is just another day in the office for him, man. I think that it's really important to consider that when we're already dealing with a fighter in Aspinall that has big question marks on his cardio. And that's especially true against somebody like Volkov, who has shown that he can take that punch and kind of drag those fights later on into the round. I think that it's very likely that we do see an adrenaline dump from Volkov, but that's not to say that it's very possible that he ends this early on the feet. That's definitely his best method to victory. As we saw in the Arlovsky fight, Arlovsky was able to kind of drag that out a little bit more, forcing Tom to shoot that double leg, and I think that was kind of plan B. Now, it worked amazingly, but I don't think that that's something that he's going to try and go to in this fight against Volkov. Volkov is a menace to try and get to the ground. He's got a 78% takedown defense and an even better get-up game on top of that. I think initiating that grappling would only accelerate the Tom gassing out, so it's probably his best chance to win by an early first-round finish. Just follow the trend that he's had for his career. I think that I'm gonna go with Volkov, just leaning on the experience level. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see an Aspinall win.
Dude, man, this is a real tough fight for me to call, man. And like you said, one of the best main events for such a hype fight card already. But you're right, man. When I look at this and I see who Volkov's fight, Tom Aspinall is not as good of a wrestler as Curtis Blades.
No.
he's not as good of a kickboxer as Cyril Gahn, you know?
No.
And so, you know, I really do think I've been on Volkov for a long time. I cashed a 2+200 ticket when he knocked out Fabricio Verdum, you know, and him putting on that weight. The guy's just continuing to evolve, and, you know, everything kind of circles back to me thinking that there is a ton of value here on Alexander Volkov. But when I watched that fight last time out with Marcin Tybura, you know, it's 30-27 on 2 scorecards, but it was a little bit sloppy, man. You know, he didn't deal well with the forward pressure of Tybura. He kind of gave up some, you know, his volume took a dip, and I think it was kind of worried of getting held on the cage, worried about the takedowns, and possibly some of the threats that, you know, Aspinall could be. The biggest thing for Aspinall, man, in the first couple rounds, he's going to be so much faster than Volkov. When I went back and watched his fights, man, it really is a ridiculous type of speed that I really only see in people like Cyril Gahn. So, you know, I think it definitely could cause Volkov some issues early. But, man, so many question marks like you talked about. It's his first 5-rounder, and he's been out of the first round like once. And then you talk about having the weight of England on his shoulders. Man, he was talking about in his interview when he won last time, I'm number 10. Okay, give me number 9. I want a slow build up. You know, I'm not ready for Francis and shit. Well, man, now you're headlining the O2 against motherfucking Volkov.
2.0.
Exactly, Volkov 2.0. And then in the Spivak fight, you listen to John Anik's commentary, and he literally specifically says that in their fighting interviews leading up to the night that Tom Aspinall's like, I've never fought in front of 20,000 people before. Want to take a random guess how much the O2 holds? 20,000 people on the dot, man. And so a ton of pressure on him, man. And then when you watch that Aspinall, or you watch Tom Aspinall versus Arlovsky, he makes a very immature move and has that cardio dump when he hurts Arlovsky and lets like a 30-punch combo go and exhausts himself and results to plan B, like you said, with the takedowns, man. So, yeah, you know, earlier in the week, I kind of was leaning Aspinall just because that speed advantage, but Volkov's shown some pretty tough durability, man. And if he gets out of that third round, I think he's absolutely live.
And in the UFC, he's definitely been able to extend those fights, and it's not like when the last knockout that he took was against Derek Lewis, but that was in the 3rd round when you started to see his technique kind of start to lack a little bit, and Derek Lewis carries that power as late into the fight as he needs
Most
to.
Most knockouts in UFC history.
Exactly.
You know? So Volkov's never been out there slept in round 1 or 2, and is the guy with under 10 fights going to do it, man? I just don't know. So, yeah, I think I'm going to pick Volkov, and then I'll kind of get into it, I think, later on in my prop, how I'm going to approach this fight. Moving down a couple weight classes, featherweight division here in the co-main event where we see Arnold Allen taking on Dan Hooker. Yearly appearance for what a lot of people think could be the dark horse of the featherweight division, and Arnold Allen, you know, he really fights like one time a year. But the dude's 8-0 in the UFC. He doesn't have the grappling style, but more like Colby and Islam, the fact that he's just boring, man. He's a lot of decisions, and it's going to take you more than 8 fights to get to the top when you're not finishing a lot of people. You know, earlier,
Leon Edwards-esque.
Yeah, Leon Edwards as well, man. He's got great size for the division. When I look at him on fight night, man, the dude looks like he's 170 pounds in there. And the only factor, I think, Dan Hooker going down to 45, I don't think he's going to have that much of a size advantage. I think it's all, honestly, a ton of negatives on Dan Hooker, especially from when I'm looking at him and seeing him signing posters. He doesn't look that good. Man, Arnold Allen, earlier in his career, was kind of getting wrestled and having to come back. I don't know how much of a real wrestling threat Dan Hooker is going to be here. And then, you know, when you're on a 3-4 fight, like losing 3 of his last 4 like Hooker has, you're moving down weight classes, you just kind of seem searching for answers, in my opinion, and that typically doesn't end up well for you. I like Allen's fight IQ. I don't like him to get in that type of brawl that Hooker tends to excel in. Yeah, man, picks Arnold Allen. I think plus 190 by decision is stupid. I think that should be like plus 140, plus 135. So I've stabbed on Arnold Allen by decision, and I've also hit his money line.
Yeah, so, you know, I'm glad that we kind of hold the same feeling where we're not nearly as worried about the weight cut of Dan Hooker as a lot of people seem to be. You know, we saw 2-3 months ago him making that weight cut for the hell of it just to prove that he could.
I think it was at the PI too.
Yes, right. And, you know, what I'm really worried about are whether or not the benefits of cutting to be the bigger guy on paper outweighs the negatives that he's going to have being the skinnier, weaker guy like you talked about. I think that it's very similar to the fight we saw a couple weeks ago with RDA and Moicano, where we were looking at a matchup where one guy was far bigger on paper, but it doesn't necessarily translate to the octagon. RDA was much stronger, able to hold him down and control him. And then on top of that, Arnold, I think, is the far stronger, faster fighter with a body much better suited for the weight class. I expect Allen to strike in this fight more than anything, but I do think that it would be a good idea for him to test that weight cut of Hooker and try and grapple with him early and make that fight dirty. When comparing the two styles of these guys, I actually see a lot of similarities. Clean striking, a sneaky submission games with their front chokes and darces. But I do have to give the slight technique edge to Allen. Even with Hooker training out of, arguably the best striking gym in the world, he doesn't have that same style of striking like Israel Adesanya does. Hooker's kind of like that take one to give one style of fight or type of fighter with not very good head movement, relies on that toughness, and shines in those wars because in those sloppy exchanges, he's able to find those openings and kind of resort back to the muscle memory. But what's going to happen when Arnold doesn't make this a slugfest? From what I've seen, Arnold's more than happy to sit on the outside with his jab, circle
big
off.
Cage now.
Yeah, big cage. He uses that lead hook to circle off whenever he does get backed up against the cage, and he's looking to set up that clean 1-2 for 15 minutes. I really do think that it's on Arnold's terms how this fight goes, and because of that, I actually think it's going to be Hooker who's going to have to change his style to compete in this spot, whereas Allen could come in without having any more developments since his last fight and probably still coast his way to a decision, like you were saying.
Dude, he's 28 years old. I guarantee you, any layoff and every time he's gonna be better. Whereas Dan Hooker, we've seen the finished product of Dan Hooker, and then I talk about him, searching for answers, coming down. Man, when he left featherweight, he got beat by Jason Knight, and his body just did not hold up to that weight cut. You've gone up to 55 for the past 5 years. You've taken some life-changing beatings to Edson and Dustin. I'm just not a fan of it, man. There are still winnable fights for you at 145, and I think he's got a real tough fight in front of him with Arnold Allen.
So my fight of the night is going to be the much-anticipated debut of Mohammad Mokaev versus Cody Durden. This is a fight Muhammad has been calling for since he was signed to the UFC in November of last year.
Smash him.
Born in Dagestan, Russia, and ready to kill this racist dude. He was born in Dagestan, Russia, but due to some political issues with his dad, they ended up moving to the UK, where he dominated in anything that he tried, man. He became multiple-time British wrestling champion, 4-time IMMAF gold medalist, and I'm as impressed as I could possibly be about somebody's amateur and pro career coming into the UFC. I'm also extremely happy that Muhammad chose to stay away from dominance MMA like a lot of these Dagestanis choose to. True. And instead he chose to be managed with Paradigm, who's produced plenty of stars.
Yes, sir.
I think that this matchup with Durden is a great introduction to the big show for Mokaev. I personally think he has the advantage in just about everywhere in this matchup. When you break down the two styles of fighters, I think it's clear that neither of these fighters' bread and butter is on the feet, but I also think it's pretty clear that Mokaev is the much more polished striker of the two, and definitely utilizes that striking to set up his takedown entries way more effectively than Cody Durden does. I look back at Durden's fight with Arichi Long, and Durden was fighting for his life to close that space, and it didn't look great. And one other thing is it got progressively worse as the fight went on.
Round 3 was bad.
Yeah, which seems to be a reoccurring theme in Cody Durden's fight. You look back at the Chris Gutierrez 10-8 first round 1, and then it slowly tails off, ending up in a draw. Then you take a look at the grappling side of things, and I do give the slight edge to Mokaev as well. Even though I think it's a much closer fight than a lot of people would like to think, and much closer than I'd like to admit. I understand Cody, 2-time Georgia State wrestling champion in high school, and no joke, especially early in that fight, like I said, but it's whether or not he can sustain that type of output over 3 rounds, which I just don't think he can against somebody like Mokaev with that type of cardio. I see a close round one with a lot of grappling exchanges that's going to wear on that cardio. And midway through the second, I think that we see those tides start to shift significantly in the favor of Mokaev, possibly even resulting in a late finish. I'm super comfortable putting him in my parlays. Maybe not the sharpest bet, but he is a part of my 6-unit parlay for this week.
I think you picked, honestly, one of the best fights on the card for your fight of the night, man. Yeah. I'm stoked for this dude's debut. You know, I don't want to hate on Cody Durden too much, though. You know, he's a good old Southern boy like ourselves. He throws his hat in there for best fisherman in the UFC. Okay. You know, he just trains right down there in Atlanta and everything with the Lima brothers. And you're right. You know, you talked about he has a legit wrestling background, and to his defense a little bit, I almost want to say like we might not have seen the best Cody Durden yet. You know, the Chris Gutierrez fight, he is on like a couple days' notice. It's short notice for him. Mm-hmm. Jimmy Flick fight, he tears his ACL in the fight. And then in the last fight with the Ricci Lang, you know, he's coming off the shelf for more than a year and stuff from an ACL tear. So maybe this is the first real, you know, good fight that we see Cody Durden in. But that's about really all I can say because you really went in deep on it. Every aspect of the game, I favor Mokaev, you know. 23 amateur fights, so he's much more experienced in this 5-0 where he looks like. In some of those amateur fights, he's literally fighting a fight every day for like 3 or 4 or 5 days at a time. You know, so I know he's durable. And people are going to knock, you know, the competition. But the dude is 21 years old. Like, who's he supposed to be fighting? You know, when he's 17 and 18, is he going to fight 35-year-old men? No, you know. So, you know, since turning pro, the guy fought 4 times in 2020, 3 times in 2021. Very, very active, good size for flyweights. And then you see, you know, I told you earlier, we see Dana pass on people in the Contender Series when he says they're not ready. And everybody's bitching and complaining on Twitter, and they go out there and get slept in the first round. Mo Miller, you know, Solomon Renfro. Dana knows, man. You know, Dana knows if you're ready. He's had this experiment with Sage Northcutt bringing him in. It didn't work. The fact that he's doing it over again, man, I think he has high hopes for this guy. Cody Durden coming off the stool in round 2 was breathing so heavy from all the grappling that was involved in that Ricci Lang fight. I think he has a tough cut to 125. Massive speed advantage for Mokaev. I love that left head kick that he has, and I think that's something that could really catch Cody Durden. I'm all over him, man.
He's able to let those weapons go because he's not worried about that takedown. Dude, yeah, and I think that's like the huge difference in the stand-up is that Mokaev is able to throw whatever he wants, where Durden, he's really only doing it to set up that wrestling.
One point I did see on Twitter, Cody Safdie, which, you know, is one of the biggest podcasters, biggest names in MMA out there, he did say he worked his last event, Mohammad Mokaev's last event, which is not on the tape index to be able to watch. He did get the round 2 finish, but Cody said he did not really look impressive up until that point. That is a person's opinion that I do, you know, I'm highly, I like what he says and things. So it's something that I might look at, but still when I look at this matchup, I favor Mokaev everywhere, man. And for my fight of the night, up a couple weight classes in the light heavyweight division, I chose Nakita Krylov and Paul Craig because, man, when the fuck is Paul Craig in a boring fight, you know? I got a plus 134 ticket on Krylov, which I feel kind of bad about because I think it was ended up being a messed up line. But when is FanDuel the first one to ever drop lines? You know, I thought I was getting some excellent gifted line on Krylov, who I am going to side with here. For Paul Craig, honestly, man, when you look at how he wins, it's one way, dude, and it's almost, you know, submission from guard. He's just absolutely made a living off of it. You know, Ankalaev is a bit of an outlier, but, you know, maybe even Jamal Hill a little bit. But really the other submission wins, Enrique Da Silva, Kennedy Nzechukwu, Vinicius Moreira, Gadzimir Antigilov. Paul Craig is not submitting the highest level of guys, you know, and I say Ankalaev is a bit of an outlier. He gets him in a triangle, but, I mean, there was 1 second left, you know. So any other day, I think that does go the full 5 rounds. And then we have seen Krylov submitted in the past, so there is a bit of a worry there, and I don't hate people taking a stab on Paul Craig's, you know, submission line, but I don't necessarily think Paul Craig has the same level of wrestling that we've seen other people have that have gotten Krylov down. You see Paul Craig with a 25% takedown accuracy, and I've also seen Krylov, you know, have Ankalaev take him down, and, you know, multiple times. I've watched him get backpacked by Glover and stay safe, and so, you know, he does make a living off of it, but I feel like that sub is a bit more Hail Mary here than it is anything. And then when I go to the feet, dude, I really do feel like there's a massive advantage for Krylov on the feet here. What I really like to approach this line outside of Nakita Krylov, you're getting minus 186 on FanDuel for fight doesn't go the distance. And if you have not picked a side yet, Paul Craig I don't think has ever seen a decision. And Nakita Krylov is approaching 35 fights with like 30-something finishes and stuff. So, man, you got over a 90% finish rate combined here, and you're getting under minus 200 for fight doesn't go the distance. And I think this is going to be a killer fight, and I think we see a finish.
Doesn't that sound like every fight doesn't go the distance that's set up? And of course, we'll see the judges. I think the biggest thing that I'm worried about in this fight, I think you did, a great breakdown, but we got to take into consideration that Nakita Krylov does try and get this fight to the ground. He at least tries over one time a fight, and I think that's where he could get himself into some trouble. Because like you said, Paul Craig's wrestling, not that great.
Right.
Willing to pull guard. But god dang it, if he doesn't attract people like,
Mackenzie Dern.
Exactly, like Mackenzie Dern. Like, I mean, it's just crazy. People forget that game plan and are willing to go down to the mat with him. And I don't think that it's so much of his opponents showing bad fight IQ as Paul Craig just having an ability to sucker his opponents into that position and get himself those kind of suck out wins with the submissions. I think it's a real possibility, and like you said, it's a great way to look at playing this fight. When Paul Craig is going to get a finish, why not take his submission prop at 4
plus 480 or something like that?
Yeah, 420, 480, whatever it is. For my fighter to watch, I'm choosing Gunnar Nelson. And he's one of these guys that I'd love to, highlight him as a fighter and what he brings to the table. But it's actually, I'm keeping an eye on him for a couple different reasons. He's coming off of multiple rib injuries, the latest of which he revealed was a result of grappling with the Mountain from Game of Thrones. 350-pound man is not somebody you want to goof around with on the mat. But that's kept him from competing through what, would arguably be the prime of his career. I do think that this matchup against Takashi Sato is probably the easiest fight in recent memory for Gunnar. But, Takashi Sato is a formidable opponent, and knowing his ability for fast starts like we saw in the Jason Witt fight, it really leaves zero room for error for ring rust for Gunnar coming back here. 3 of 4 of Sato's last losses come by way of submission. This fight is being put on in the UK. They got Gunnar on the main card. I don't think it's a mystery what the UFC is shooting for here, but they can only do so much, man. I think when you look at Gunnar Nelson's losses before he left, they're really aging well,
right.
2 of the best guys in the division with Leon Edwards and Gilbert Burns 3 years after the fact. And so, if he does come in here on Saturday and put on a great performance, I think that he can rightfully be thrown back into the mix with the other top welterweights like he never left.
I hope you're right, man. I think that was an excellent pick because our friend group always got hype when Gunnar Nelson was fighting.
Shout out, Chan.
Yes, sir. You mentioned Edwards and Burns, but, even the other losses before that, Damian Maia on his run to the belt, how you going to out-grapple him?
I was about to say, an awful stylistic matchup right there.
And then when he gets knocked out against Ponzinibbio, that's Ponzinibbio's 7-fight win streak when he's on a tear before he goes through his health issues, Takashi Sato cannot dream of being on the same level of the 4 guys that I think Gunnar Nelson's lost to. He does train with some very good guys at Sanford MMA. But man, he's taking it on short notice. He's flying over, having to make a weight cut and everything. He's also been out of action for like a year. And when you talked about, his last 3 losses or whatever being by sub, dude, he was Miguel Baeza's first submission of his career. He was Bilal Muhammad's first submission of his career, man. Cool. There's guys that don't even have submissions on their record, taking him down and submitting him. And who's Sato beaten? Ben Saunders and Jason Witt. That's 2 of the worst chins on the entire UFC roster. And that was the fight where Jason Witt was called up on a day notice, was on the prelims, but they didn't get his medicals in time, so they bumped him to the main card all on short notice, and he gets TKO'd in like 30 seconds. You just really can't take away much from who Sato's beating. When I try to factor in narratives, layoffs, all that stuff, I keep coming back to styles make fights, and man, if Gunnar gets this guy down, I think Gunnar submits him. I think you picked an excellent fighter to keep an eye on for multiple reasons, and I think Gunnar's in a good spot to win on Saturday. You can't break down this card without talking about Paddy the Baddy, man. So Paddy Pimblett's going to be my fighter to watch, even more so after the altercation with Ilya and everything today. That is a fight I would love to see be made going forward. Perfect timing with them both on this card as well, you know. For Paddy Pimblett, my one knock on this guy, a little bit like Darren Till, a little bit like Jorge Masvidal, he lets himself get out of shape, man, you know, from between fight camps. And I don't think the best fighters in the world do that. I think the best fighters in the world are back in the gym and stay in fight shape all the time, man. But to kind of counteract that, dude, he's built for the spotlight. You know, he is not going to be shaken one bit. He has headlined the Echo Arena in, you know, Liverpool, his hometown. That's the same place they let Darren Till headline the UFC event. You know, he's made for the moment, man. He's got this walkout that I can't wait to see on Saturday. That, you know, the UFC Apex should just not do a Paddy Pimblett walkout justice. And his striking, it's coming along, you know. There's plenty of scary moments in that Luigi fight. He was leaving that chin up. He was not seeing the left hook whatsoever. But I got to see him take a shot. You know, he wore it well. You know, yeah, he looked, I guess you could say, on wobbles. You know, he was rocked, but man, he was always, yeah, he's a scouser. And he was always there, man. You know, he got taken down. He got back to his feet. And, you know, odds makers here, I think, are looking at that fight a little bit too much because, you know, all the lines indicate that he's a striker, that he's going to get these knockouts. And when you look at Cage Warriors, he's utilizing a whole lot of his grappling, and I think that's where Vargas is the weakest at as well. I think the sub prop for Paddy at 2 plus 280 is nice. I've hit his round 1 sub at plus 650 and round 2 at plus 1,000. I really expect him to go back to the well here on Saturday with his grappling, probably take Vargas down. You know, Luigi was a black belt on the mat, much higher level than you're going to see here from Vargas, you know. And not only that, man, Paddy is not some, you know, undefeated 8-0 guy with the pressure on his shoulders, man. This guy's lost. He's picked himself up from losses before and stuff. As much as I may necessarily not like Paddy the Baddy, haven't jumped on the train yet, he's excellent for the sport. There's a reason Barstool signed him, man. That's why he's my fighter to watch.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's tough not to talk about Paddy Pimblett when you're talking about this fight card right here. It's kind of, I think, set up for him, you know? He's the people's main event for sure. Here's one thing I want to note, though, is, you know, after watching Paddy Pimblett's tape, rarely does he ever look like a minus 400 favorite. There are always those close calls in the fights. And so, you know, I think that, yeah, he should probably win this, but there's a reason why I have left Paddy Pimblett out of my parlays. I think that you're paying a lot of juice just because he's the people's main event.
Paddy Pimblett.
Yeah, because he's Paddy Pimblett. And hell, like, I want to see him win, and so does everybody else, but he does show some glaring errors in his defense, and it doesn't take a great fighter to exploit those holes, and it just takes one lucky shot. So for me, I don't think he's backing up that price tag, but I do love the fact that we're getting to see Paddy Pimblett and hopefully get some steam rolling behind him.
One thing else I want to mention, the Paddy Pimblett that we were seeing in Cage Warriors, the Paddy Pimblett we saw in his debut, man, physically he looks like he's went through an absolute transformation, you know, kind of like Sean O'Malley over the recent years. Yeah, maybe I am jumping on the Paddy the Baddy train, but he's definitely somebody you got to keep your eyes on Saturday.
For my underdog pick of the card, I'm going to have to go with Luana Carolina, man. Realistically, as I look down this card, I think I probably might have wanted to go with your underdog or Volkov, but I wanted to talk about somebody different here. I think Luana has a real chance here as the dog, and, you know, neither one of these girls are very high on my list. They're actually both on my fade list, which is why I think that I'm seeing Molly as a favorite, and I'm immediately, you know, grimacing. We actually cashed on Luana Carolina as a dog already in her most recent fight against Lupe Godinez, and damn it if I don't have the same fucking breakdown this time. Luana is a very big girl for the division, man. But her technique is lacking. She moves in the octagon like somebody who is still green in her skills, but is developing every single fight. I think that she does a decent job using her length and size to her advantage. And in a fight that I think will take place on the feet, I think there's a really good chance that Molly gets touched up on the outside of Luana's 7-inch reach advantage. Molly, in all of her fights, is way too hittable for my liking. And more recently, she's not utilizing her wrestling enough to make me think that she's going to switch it up for this fight right here. I cannot get a fight out of my head. It's the Molly McCann versus Laura Procopio fight, where Molly, and that's when she made my fade list. It was her accepting bottom position multiple times, getting taken down 7 times by Laura Procopio, man. Like, I'm not very high on Laura, and I see plus money on Luana here. Luana opened as the favorite. Yeah. I'm going to agree with the odds makers and side with her here.
Size is everything in women's MMA, man.
Especially lower level women's MMA.
And we've cashed on it numerous times. On the feet, Molly's got a shit ton of distance to close, and she has shit for striking defense. In her wrestling, it's not as high as Loopy's, if you want my honest opinion. She's not as good of a wrestler in Loopy, and Loopy was just unsuccessful in it.
Molly doesn't do it anymore.
You're right, and she's not the biggest flyweight either. Yeah, man. I think Luana's a pretty dang good dog and has a good chance of making you 2 underdogs in a row, hopefully.
I hope so.
Yeah, for me, almost obligated to take my dude Jack Shore. You know, man, I've been riding the Jack Shore train since he was signed, and he's a guy that I see real potential in. He's 15-0, 11-fight amateur, background as well, where he went undefeated. And martial arts has been a part of this guy's life, forever, with his dad owning the gym. From day one, he's been on the mats. He's going to have a big size advantage over Timur Valiev. He's like 2 or 3 inches bigger than him, and I think when he gets on the mat, size is going to help him hold there. But Timur is a little weasel, man. He's got very good footwork. He's got to have the big octagon, to dance around in. He's going to be harder, in my opinion, to get his hands on than a lot of Jack Shore's previous opponents. He's been dropped a couple times in the UFC, man, so his chin's a little bit suspect to me. Trevin Jones, who was it? Ronnie Barcelos dropped him twice with like just a little check left or check right hook, and I don't know. So it's something moving forward. Jack's not the best striker, but being so young as he is, I think he's always going to improve every time we see him out. Timur Valiev throws a ton of kicks, and I think that is not what you want to do when someone's game plan is to take you down. And if he's still coming out here and throwing a ton of kicks, I think he's going to give Jack Shore the opportunity to get this fight down to the mat. It is a big step up for him, man. I've lost a ton of value on Jack Shore. I wish I would have got in early, but I honestly thought the line was going to trend in the other direction. I'm going to take Jack Shore. I'm always going to ride with my boy. I like the grappling upside. Won't be surprised, man, if Timur Valiev honestly comes out, though.
Yeah, so I'm with you that the grappling upside is definitely on Shore, but you touched on it a little bit. Valiev's a weasel, and by that I mean he can get to his fucking feet, man. I mean he's shown throughout his career that he can get taken down, but he immediately pops back up to his feet. And I think trying to side with Jack Shore, the biggest the reason why I'm hesitant is because of the unknowns. Jack Shore really hasn't been tested, and so to think that he's going to have the exact same success getting this fight to the ground, grappling, it's kind of a reach, man. Timur Valiev has proven to be one of these upper echelon guys, where Jack Shore just hasn't taken that step yet. So for me, I'm definitely happy with just kind of laying off and then seeing how Shore progresses after this fight, and depending on how this fight goes, it'll definitely be how I determine if he's a fade in the future or a legitimate prospect here.
I like it, man. I honestly feel like this card resembles some pay-per-views. I think we see a ton of favorites win on Saturday, and it was real hard for me to pick an underdog, if you want my honest opinion. I think we got the best 2 on the card, if you want the real truth, though.
I like it. All right, my prop bet for the night is going to be Paul Craig by submission at plus 420. Debated on it a little bit. I think that you're getting incredible value there. The dude has a 100% finish rate. Krylov has submission losses. It's definitely the most likely outcome, and to go from a -1 or plus 142 money line on Paul Craig to a plus 420 on the most likely path to victory, I think that you're getting pretty good odds there. So for my prop bet, I think that that's the one that I wanted to highlight this week.
Dude, I think I'm trying to count it up here. It's like 11 of his 15 wins are by submission, and Jamal Hills was graded as a TKO for some reason, so it should be like 12.
Right.
To get plus 420 on that and to see Krylov being submitted, I don't hate you hitting that prop and bouncing on that one. My prop bet this week is going to be Volkov rounds 4, 5, or decision at plus 310, which I think is an incredible number for one. I think I was a little hesitant to play Volkov straight up because I think early in rounds 1 and 2, talked about in the main event, serious speed disadvantage that he's at. And Tom Aspinall is likely, if he's the legit contender that he is, to get that finish in round 1 or 2. Man, after that, maybe I'm playing fire in round 3 if Aspinall's super drained, but I like Volkov, man, in those late rounds, 4 or 5 championship rounds. I know, Tom Aspinall has yet to see, and maybe even a decision where Volkov, 30-27 type era, but just kind of looked awful and was just content with playing pitter-patter on the outside. And so I think he's live to take a decision here as well. With all the, the competition level that Volkov has over Tom Aspinall, to get plus 310 on what I think is a very likely path for him, I think is going to be my prop bet this week.
All right, so before we move on to our best bet, P and I just noticed a line on Sergey Pavlovich by submission at plus 3,400.
Tico minus 220.
I think that there's a very good chance that Pavlovich comes in here and just dominates him at will. Yeah. I think the submission prop is definitely live, and at plus 3,400, put a free bet on that, guys.
Absolutely, man.
Moving on to my best bet of the night. We go back to the main event where Volkov versus Aspinall fight doesn't go to decision is minus 175. I think that is an absolute huge market overcorrection for these past main events that have been seeing the judges. Right. I don't have the stats in front of me, but I know the overwhelming majority of the last 20 events have hit the over.
6 in a row at one point or something.
Yeah, and we've been on the shit end of that one plenty of times. I'm willing to take another stab at it. I think to be able to get minus 175, one, Aspinall has a great chance of winning in those first 2 rounds. 2, anytime it's made it to the second round,
looks a little sketch. Yeah,
looks a little sketch. And 2 out of the 3 times it has gone to the second round, Aspinall loses. Now he has to do 3 more rounds on top of that against a 6'7" monster in Volkov. I just don't think it's possible. So I'm not necessarily picking a side, but I love picking that this fight won't see the judges. We've got heavyweights in here, and we're getting minus 175 for 5 rounds.
I love it, man. I think that's a very, very good bet, and hopefully cashes you another best bet that you give out. For me, Ilia Topuria inside the distance. He's like a minus 500, so I knew I was going to have to pay a little bit for him inside the distance, but anywhere between minus 175, minus 220, definitely hittable straight up or parlayable in my opinion. On the feet, Topuria, he's a motherfucker, man. His striking looks top notch. I love the way he throws to the body to drop your hands. He throws heavy in every shot. Jai Herbert has a ton of body for Topuria to tag on Saturday as well. And then you want to touch on the chin of Jai Herbert, who's been knocked out by Reese McKee and Trinaldo. Trinaldo one being, kind of bad. I feel the power of Topuria is really going to shut his lights out if he lands. Let's go to Jai on the mat, man. Has not looked very good. Moicano was just dominating him there. He's so long. He's so lanky. I don't feel like he's going to be able to stop the wrestling of Topuria and might even eventually give up the submission again. Mm-hmm. He's a natural 55er. He is long. He is technical. I wish Topuria would stay at featherweight where I think he probably has the most success. This fight right here draws me back a little bit to the Arman versus Joel Alvarez fight a couple weeks ago, and maybe Ilya's not on the level of Arman, but Jai Herbert's not the level of Joel Alvarez either, in my opinion. I do think it could be the same. I think we could see, Topuria dominate with the wrestling, open him up in the guard with some elbows and things like that, and maybe even get a ground and pound finish, but on the feet or on the ground, I could see Ilia Topuria nuking this guy on Saturday, and thank God they put this guy up on the main card now, I think is what it is, where I think he belongs.
And I couldn't agree more that the inside the distance is the way to play this, but I know a lot of people are on that Jai Herbert being chinny, and you are seeing plus 200 on Ilia Topuria by TKO.
That is nice and juicy.
That's tasty right there.
It is.
But yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that Ilia, if he was smart about it, Herbert's best opportunity is on the feet. So get this fight to the ground. Get the inside the distance prop because he could finish him like he did Ryan Hall. Yes, that's a great bet.
I love it.
We move on to our quick picks of the night. We start off with the opener between Mohammad Mokaev versus Cody Durden. Who you got here, P? Tough one.
Tough one. Give me Mohammad Mokaev.
I love it. So, same with me. Moving up, we've got Nathaniel Wood versus Vince Morales.
I've hit that money line at minus 240 for 2 units. Nathaniel Wood all the way here.
I think Wood is an absolute lock. We move to the women's strawweight division where we see Elsa Reed taking on Corey McKenna. How do you see this one?
Man, I feel like this is my sketchiest pick of the night. I do have Corey McKenna parlayed. Yeah, it's some chalk and some girls, so I'm scared, but I got Corey McKenna.
I could see how you'd be scared, but I have to agree with you. Corey McKenna is the side. Moving on, we go to the bantamweight division where we see Jack Shore taking on Timur Valiev. What do you think about this?
I got to go with my boy. I'm always going to back him, Jack Shore.
This is our first disagreement of the night. I think I lean Timur, but I understand taking a dog shot on Jack. All right, now we go to the light heavyweight division where we see Nakita Krylov taking on Paul Craig. Who you got?
I got Nakita Krylov.
I think I got Paul Craig. I'm hoping that submission prop hits. Going up, we have featherweights with...
skipped one.
Oh,
Shamil and Sergey first.
Yes, okay, so some heavyweights with Shamil Abdurakhimov versus Sergey Pavlovich. Who you got there?
I know he's been on a layoff and stuff like that, but man, I think Sergey is... Honestly, I think he could be the real deal. Sergey's inside the distance.
I hope he picks up right where he left off. He's an awesome fighter, and I hope he smashes on Saturday. Now we move to the featherweight division where we see Mike Grundy taking on Makwan Amirkhani.
This is my fight to completely pass on, honestly, on Saturday. You know, I told you earlier, Mike wants to defend like 7 takedowns in his UFC history, and I think he sees 7 takedown attempts maybe in the first round here, so I don't know how it's going to go. Makwan can lock up some darts once Grundy takes him down. I don't know. We are in London, England, though. Mike Grundy, split decision.
I think I'm also leaning Grundy in this spot as well. Now we have Jai Herbert taking on Ilya Taporia.
Perfect main card opener. Ilya gonna knock this guy out in the first round.
I hope so. I really do. I think Ilya is set up for stardom after this one. Then we move on to Molly McCann versus Luana Carolina.
It's tricky, man. It's tricky. I think there is a ton of value on the bigger girl in Luana Carolina, but this is another situation where I think some home cooking could possibly come into play. I'm gonna go out on a limb. Molly McCann, split decision.
I'm off the meatball train. I'm taking Luana in that spot. And then we have the return of Gunnar Nelson taking on Takashi Sato. Who you got there?
There's a lot of, question marks and everything around this fight and Gunnar's return, but man, styles make fights. Gunnar Nelson by submission. Yeah,
UFC is setting Gunnar up here for a submission, and I think he goes out there and does it.
I mean, Sato's been submitted, like we said, multiple times, and it's short notice. I mean, why are you taking this fight? It's not a good style fight for you.
Right.
I like Gunnar Nelson.
100%. Then we have the people's main event, Paddy to Batty Pimblett taking on Rodrigo Vargas. What do you feel?
I'm going to go Pimblett, and I did take that submission prop, I think. Like I said, the bookies, and I was thinking he's fallen in love with his hands. I hope he hasn't. Hope he goes out there and submits Vargas in round 2. Let me catch that plus 1,000.
I hope it doesn't see round 2 at all, but I do want to see a Paddy the Batty submission in round 1. It still allow you to cash there.
As long as you get to see the walkout, right?
Yes, exactly. Moving on to the co-main event, we have Arnold Allen taking on Dan the Hangman Hooker. Who you got there?
Arnold Allen, man. I think the days of the best Dan Hooker are past him.
100%. I think that this is a last-ditch effort to kind of get his career back, and I think he picked an awful opponent to try that with Arnold Allen. And then our main event, Alexander Volkov versus Tom Aspinall, official pick.
Official pick, Volkov live. No, Volkov. Volkov's going to be my pick, man. I think he is just a little bit too big of a step up. And then again, like I said, Tom's been vocal about not wanting that big step up and, not fighting in front of 20,000 people. It's just not what you like to hear.
First 5-rounder, I got to agree. The experience is going to shine through with Volkov. So I'm with you on the Volkov pick.
On a lot of the same sides, man. I like to hear that. Wouldn't mind if both of us go positive, but I can transfer the hat over here next week. I appreciate you guys hanging out with us. I hope you guys like the new format of the podcast, new intro as well, and appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't. We'll see you next week.
Peace.